Welcome to In Conversation. This is a brand new series that I'm doing where I sit down and talk with other writers about different sort of writing, publishing topics. It's just like a super casual conversation where you can kind of get insight into different writing experiences. And of course, you can always feel free to join the conversation in the comments section. And today we're talking about imposter syndrome, and I'm here with Louisa, who I will let introduce herself.
Hi guys, it's Louisa Onomé. I'm a YA writer. I have a debut contemporary coming out in 2021 with HarperCollins Canada and Delacorte Press. And I'm just excited to talk about imposter syndrome. I think it's going to be fun, which is, I guess, a strange way to describe it, considering it can be kind of debilitating, but I'm excited. So
yeah, it's one of those things where it's like some of the like sad writer stuff is like super fun to talk about, even though it's
I
like
know.
kind of depressing, but sometimes I
Yeah.
feel like people really like depressing topics. So
I know. For some reason, it's how a lot of us kind of bond, I think. So
yeah,
I'm not surprised. So
not at all. I suspected this was going to be a hot topic of the topics I've listed.
yeah.
So I'm going to start off real quick and like define imposter syndrome in case you have never heard of this before. I'm going to say like real casually, imposter syndrome is basically where you are kind of convinced that you have tricked everyone, that you are in a position that you don't necessarily deserve, but somehow you have sleuthed your way into it. And now you're tricking everyone because they think that you're this like great thing, and you're like, actually I am a trash fire and you don't know it. And I really like
I feel like that's pretty accurate. That's like
yeah,
describes a lot of the feelings that are associated with it. I
exactly.
was always I don't have like a solid definition, but I was always like, it's just like all those feelings of inadequacy that you have, but only related to stuff that you're actually good at. Because I find that you normally like don't get imposter syndrome if it's something that you're not very good at or like you've never tried before. But it's always like you've studied a lot for something, or this is your field, or this is kind of like your expertise, and suddenly you're just like, oh, I actually don't know at all what I'm talking about, and like people are gonna find out that I'm a fraud and like that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
So
for sure. And I
yeah,
feel like the more you care about it, the more you're convinced that
yes,
everyone knows you're a fraud. I feel like there's
yeah,
stuff like at work, and I'll talk about it and I know I'm the expert on it, and I'm like, whatever, I know about this thing, and I don't think too much about it. But like if it's a project I really care about, or if it's like a book or something, then that's when like imposter syndrome comes in.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's really, that's exactly, I'm the exact same way. I think it's funny because like at work, like I'm not super fond of my day job. So I won't really like, I don't know, put myself forward for things or kind of like speak up a lot just because I'm like, that's that or whatever. But with
Yeah.
writing, I feel like it's not even like the need to try and get things right, but it's just like I just don't want to disappoint myself. And I feel like disappointing myself, like within that, it's kind of like, well, am I actually any good at this?
Yeah.
Um, like who told me that I could write this, or who told me I could do this, that sort of thing. And I feel like it's only, like with something you actually care about. With
Yeah.
everything else, it's just like,
I'd love to chat about kind of the first time you experienced imposter syndrome, or like that you can remember kind of for sure, where you were like, this is my first time experiencing this in writing.
and write it. Okay.
Yeah.
With me, I think a lot of my imposter syndrome originally and then even now kind of comes from when I'm in spaces with other writers and then feeling like everyone is smarter than me about like everything. And it comes in waves, like it's really strange. I think the first time I remember feeling like that was I went to an event, I believe, and it was like a writing event sort of thing. And even though like I was like invited and that sort of thing, I was just kind of like surrounded by all these other really cool writers, people from like out of the country, like that sort of thing. And I'm just like, oh, and I'm just here. Like that was way before I had like a book deal, anything. And I was like, I don't have a book deal. Like these people have actual books on the shelves. Like I don't know where I think I'm going calling myself a writer when I don't have anything to show for it. And it was just, I don't know, devastating is not the exact word, but that's like the first word that came to mind. I was like, this is like, I don't know if I belong in this sort of place.
Yeah,
So
like discomfort where you're like, is somebody going to ask me if I have a book deal and then I'll have to say no? And then like, what are they going to think? Are they going to think I'm not
Yeah,
serious or
I
like,
know. It's like the worst because it's, I don't know, like it comes out of nowhere because like you're invited and you show up there like for this event or whatever,
yeah,
hypothetically. But then you get there and you're like, I can do this. This is fine. And then you walk in and then you realize, oh, everyone seems much more established than I am. And
yeah,
for me, like, even though I'm not like, I'm no longer the youngest person in the room, but I walk in and I'm like, oh my God, like, I feel like a baby. Like everyone here looks so put together. They're like extreme adults, like they're a higher level of adult than I am. And I just kind of feel like I don't belong here. They're going to look at me funny. Like they're going to be like, why is she here? Like, you know, those types of things. And it just kind
yeah.
of spirals out of control.
Yeah,
So,
and I feel like that's like a big part of the imposter syndrome is like
mhm.
thinking about what other people are thinking of you because you're like, do people realize that I'm an imposter?
I
Do
know.
they
Do they know I'm a
know?
baby?
Are they talking about me behind my back about why is
Yeah,
this person here?
I
Even though
know.
like objectively no one is ever doing
Right. And it's funny because I always think like, oh, if somebody doesn't like my book, for example, like
that.
I would be okay with that. That's their prerogative. Like it's fine.
Yeah,
But if somebody thought that I was like a fraud, I'm like, oh my God, like for some reason that's worse or like a different sort of impact, I think.
yeah,
Um, I don't know. And it's completely different because you'd think it'd be similar, but it's not. Like
no,
it's no.
it's not the
So
same. It's very different. I feel
yeah.
like the first time I had imposter syndrome, it was like in university, I took creative writing classes. So like just in the last 2 years, I like dropped my minor because I was like, who needs minors? And then I realized the minor was useless. I was like, I'm gonna drop it and then I'll take less courses each year and I'll have more time and I can like take some other stuff. So then I took a creative writing course, which
Mhm.
was like great. But then there was like an advanced course. And so you like submitted your work again to like whether you get put in the advanced course. And then I
Mhm.
gotten into the advanced course and I'm like sitting there. And at this point, like in these courses, I never like, I think I showed young adult work like once and it was horrific. They never like it because all the like school writing classes are so like literary fiction.
Yeah.
And so I was only doing like adult literary short stories. And I was just like sitting there in this room of people in this like semicircle. And I was like, I don't know that I'm necessarily good enough to be here in this advanced class. And I was like, how are other people? And I was like, are other people like much better than me? Like, am I actually like earning of this or am I just here because I like took the course before? So I just got lobbed into this one. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that sort of weird thing, especially like those courses, because then you like read your writing, right?
Yeah.
So you're reading aloud and everybody's listening to your writing and then it becomes a like constant comparison of like, okay, this person, they like love this person's story and like two people said that was like cool or like I got a couple comments but this person like the room like talked for like 20 minutes about their story and like
Mhm.
all of that like constant comparing and then I was like I don't know that I'm supposed to be here. um and yeah, that weird atmosphere, especially like in literary fiction courses, because then you like submit your stories to journals and like things like that. I've
Mhm.
never gotten in a journal even once, no matter how hard I try.
Same, same. I know. I feel like as much as I enjoy literary fiction, I feel like as someone as well, like even though I only kind of identified what I was writing as YA like fairly recently-ish,
Mhm.
um, I still felt like, oh, I'm not even good enough to write literary fiction. Like my when I was in university, I took professional writing, that was my major,
Mhm.
and we had I can't
I
remember
didn't
the
know you
name of
did
the
that.
class,
I
but
didn't
we
know
had
you
to
did
like
like full writing yeah as your major.
yeah, it was like it was an experience. I don't know how much I recommend, but it was yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah, so like while I was there, like as much as I like enjoyed literary fiction, I just felt
Yeah.
like even when I tried to write like those people, like I was not good at it. And then I was like, oh, everyone's gonna think I'm untalented or whatever. Like it was just was not. I understand. Like you were in those sorts of scenarios, and it's just kind of like, especially in workshop scenarios, you
Yeah.
really feel in those places where like everybody is kind of exchanging and swapping, and even though it's supposed to be kind of like even for everybody, you still sort of feel like, oh, the comments other people are getting might be different than mine, or oh, they're more focused on that story. Like it seems like they spent more time on that one, so clearly they like that one more than mine, or you know what I mean? So
exactly. And it's just like you could so like read the room. I feel like when you read in a circle, like this story was a story people thought was the best, and this is a story people dislike the most.
yeah.
It's more helpful to imposter syndrome than to have like the worst story. Because when I was from like age 16 to 18, I wrote like my first book, which was like a werewolf book. And
Okay.
I don't know what possessed me, knowing that writing groups always hate YA,
Yeah.
especially YA fantasy. I don't know what possessed me to bring in the first chapter, and they just fucking hated it. They couldn't. It was just like only criticism.
That's so uncomfortable though. Like, because you're sitting right there and they're like, oh, well.
Yes,
and it's
they were just so confused. Everyone was very confused. And I was like, oh, okay, so I was like, I cannot write that.
Wow. Oh God. I mean, that's really brave of you. I think everything, when I started querying was like 2012, but everything I've written before that, like no one will ever see. Like I barely look at, like that's just kind of, that's that. So
Tucked away. Never
I'm just like, that was a time in life that no longer exists.
It's because I always go in cycles where I'll like get into a cycle where I think my work is like the bomb. Like I think it's the best shit that has ever hit paper. And that's when I'm like, I'm going to share this with somebody. And then I'll cycle back into like, oh my gosh, this is horrific. Never show this to anyone.
Yeah.
How has anyone read and liked anything you've written? And that's when I like get the gall to show things like my first chapter of my werewolf fantasy.
That's great though.
An adult literary group of peers. Yeah. And what would you say is like your most recent experience that you remember of imposter syndrome?
So okay, what's weird I think about this is that I don't know if it's just because it's like the year up to my debut, but it's kind of just like general insecurities every single day. Not like severely, but just kind of like varying intensities where it's like, oh wow, like I'm trash, I can't believe this. But like myself and a friend were talking about, so I'm going to be like as vague as possible. So we were talking about like something, and both her and I think like we're both equally as interested in like whatever this is. And so she was like, oh, I think I'm going to like maybe start writing about this. And I'm like, oh, that's great. Like I also am kind of writing about this, like whatever. So we were just talking back and forth. And even in our conversation, I was like, oh, she knows a lot more about this than I do. Or like, oh, it seems like she's already kind of done more research than me, and like just like small things like that. And I was just like even though we were having like it was a conversation, it was not like a lecture or anything like that, but I felt so much like I don't even know, like of the things I actually like and enjoy, I don't even know anything about them. Like I don't even know how to talk about them. Can I actually write this story? Like I don't know, maybe that's why it's not working, because I actually don't know what I'm talking about, like that kind of thing. And it just for like 30 straight minutes I was like, I don't know, maybe I should
like psych yourself out. Like the other person. Yeah, which is so fair, and that's like part of it too. Like I would say, like I started reading the Jumbies, which is like an MG book. Don't let me mess this up. I feel like Tracy Batiste. I'm gonna properly look it up. I'll put a sort of note here to tell you whether I've gotten it wrong or not.
Right.
But like she's like writing a book about Jumbies, like Caribbean folklore sort of thing. I want to say Trinidad, but I can't be sure that it's specific to Trinidad and Tobago. But anyway, and I have like a Caribbean fantasy, and I like started reading it literally like 3 pages in, and I was like, do I know enough about what I'm writing?
Oh,
and I was like, oh man, I was like, I don't know, like some of the words, like she mentioned, and I posted about this on Instagram stories, she had mentioned an agouti, and I knew that word hearing it growing up, and I was like, I think that's like a goat, and then like, looked at it.
I saw that.
It wasn't a goat at all. Like some sort of like capybara rat thing. I don't know. Anyway, and I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, what am I doing? I was like, am I too diaspora to write this?
But see, don't you feel that way sometimes? Because I started writing a second book that kind of leans very heavily on my Nigerian upbringing and everything and my heritage. And even writing it, even though the story is about a girl like me who like was born in the West and like grew up there and stuff, I was still just like, oh, I don't know if like I grew up Nigerian enough to write this story. And it was a struggle. It was a huge, huge struggle, because then all of a sudden I was questioning like a lot of stuff about my identity, which I feel at the end of the day is kind of a waste of time, because it's like you are who you are and that's what it is. But I was just like, oh, I don't know, like am I using this word in the right context? Like, even though I heard it every day of my life, I'm just like, I don't know, maybe this is not the right context, like, you know, so.
Yeah, where you're like, well, I don't know, I wasn't born there, so maybe I don't truly know, or like, maybe I don't know enough, or like, and it's this weird thing where it's like part of the imposter thing. Like, for some reason in the back of my mind, I feel like there's going to be this great unmasking. Like, I'm going to like go to
I understand exactly what you mean. That's why I'm just like, I hate how universal this is.
Yeah, like I'm going to go to a book event and someone like from Trinidad is going to like stand up and they're going to have like full on accent. They're going to be like, you don't know what you're talking about. And I'm just going to be like,
honestly. Yeah, that is like, it's so funny because that's such a specific fear, but I 100% agree. I'm just like, one day, like, you know that weird, have you seen that like Scooby-Doo meme where like the guy takes the mask off and it's like, I feel like it's gonna like unmask me and be like, oh no, like all along you were just like not Nigerian, or you just weren't this, you just weren't a writer, like whatever. And I'm just like waiting for that day to happen.
Like you're walking around and everybody else that doesn't know any better thinks that you like know enough.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you feel like you don't in fact know anything. And then someone like born and bred and raised and like still living in that place is gonna like pop out and call out all your crap, and you're gonna be like, wow, maybe I'm like not even my own culture.
And then I feel sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I can defend myself in those situations. Like, I don't know if we're getting off on like a tangent or anything, but like,
it's related.
Like, you sometimes feel like you're like someone will say something and then you can't even be like you feel like you can't even say anything. Like, I kind of feel like if someone's like, oh, I'm Nigerian too, and like we never said this in my family, then I'm gonna be like, oh, okay. Like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, yeah, sure, I don't know, because like, what
I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's like, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to, you know.
Yeah, and that's like, but I feel like that comes back to the whole imposter syndrome. Like, you're waiting for someone to come and like unmask you and expose you to the world.
Yeah,
and have everybody just like, you know, pearl clutch and be like, wow, I thought she was this, and now I know.
I thought she was authentic, and now it's like, stress.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How has the experience of imposter syndrome changed for you, if it has at all, like from like being a writer starting out in the community to now being like an upcoming 2021 author with a book deal?
Okay, what's funny, I think, is that it's actually gotten a little bit worse, which I feel like also might be normal. Like, I feel like the closer you kind of get to something that's legitimate, like the more and more you start feeling like, I don't know, like, I'm not too sure. Because in the beginning, like not to say that my querying journey, like it wasn't easy at all. Like, it was long and it was kind of irritating. But like, it was, at the time I was like, oh, I'm just gonna write a book and then send it off, and like eventually someone will say yes. And I had that sort of it's just that mentality where I'm like, this is going to work out for me. Like 100% it's going to work out. So I was like, it's not this book. That's fine. Just try again. And I just like kept going. And never did I ever feel like, oh, because they didn't like this book, like that's it for me. I don't know. Or like, I'm not too sure about this. I was like, oh, okay, well, I have another idea anyway. So like, let me just try that one or whatever. But now it's just kind of like, I don't know if it's like so many other perspectives, or like me suddenly thinking so much about other people and other opinions, where I'm just like, I don't know. I think it's just too many other people's voices in my head now compared to how it was before, when it was like I was just writing for literally just myself because no one was interested, to now where there's a different level of expectation. And so it's just like, I don't want to disappoint anyone, namely myself, but like I also don't want to like disgrace anyone, the sort of thing, like in my family. I don't know. That's like a huge thing with Nigerian people. It's like, I don't want to disgrace my parents. Like, I really want to make sure that like, if I'm serious about this, then I should kind of be serious about it. But at the same time, it's just like, am I serious about it? Like, I don't know.
It feels like it's like you're a person in a room and it's like just you chilling and like maybe you're like mumbling a story to yourself, and then like someone turns and looks at you, and then you're like, oh, okay, I guess I'll tell you the story too, and then like three more people come over, and then you've got a big crowd around you, and you're like, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I have to continue.
Honestly, yeah, because then it's just like, oh, I don't know what it is though, because it's like the more people who are watching, all of a sudden you feel like less sure of yourself, and I'm like, why is that? That's not fair. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know.
But that's how it goes sometimes. I feel like, I feel like the more I've progressed, the more I've kind of like, I feel like my imposter syndrome is very linked to like being friends with and like reading work from other writers and being like, your stuff is amazing, and you're still in the process of like getting an agent and getting a book deal. And even though there are so many other factors that like go into like getting a book deal, I like start to be like, but why, how do I, and you don't? I was like, that's crazy, because your book is like a million times better than anything I've ever written. And I'm so confused about how this has happened, interspersed with like knowing objectively that I've worked hard and that I've like done all this work. And it's not like this was like a fast journey for me. Like I finished my first book when I was 18, proceeded to basically not write for 4 years or only write adult literary. And then, like, since I was 22 to like now I'm 28, like spending that whole time writing and querying on and off, like it hasn't been a fast track, and I've certainly worked hard for it. But then I like get into this feeling of like, that's when I get hit with a lot of imposter syndrome, is when I'm like, I feel like you should be at the same level I am, and now I'm confused about how I've gotten here, and I feel that I've definitely tricked someone.
Lied to somebody. I know.
Yeah, it's confusing, and I'm like, what is happening? And like, things that like I feel like things that made me very hopeful during sub can like turn into like different stuff. I was like, oh, I've got like a good catchy hook, and it's like kind of cool that it's like a genre mix, etc. And then afterwards, I'm like, how did we sell this genre mix? I thought nobody wanted that. I'm so confused.
Yeah. I feel like, especially with publishing as well, like how you mentioned, like, I think it's just like knowing a little bit more about the market and just like kind of what's going on behind the scenes also can sort of perpetuate, I think, imposter syndrome a little bit, just in the sense where it's like there was a point recently, I'm going to preface this and say, like, I don't know anything about anything, but it's like, I was hearing people say things like, oh, no one's really buying sci-fi anymore. And then I was just like, oh, this is wonderful to know. But then I would sit there and think like, well, what if like, if someone has a sci-fi idea, if I have a sci-fi idea, like, is this not a good time? Like, I don't know. And then all of a sudden it was that whole thing again with like other people's voices in my head and like other people's opinions and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I feel like that's the buzz topic of like, not even just the year, not even 2019, because it's still happening. People are like, sci-fi doesn't sell. And it's like, okay. But then some are. It's like a very tricky spot. But yeah, it gets into that. Like the more you know about publishing and like, is this selling at this time? And like, what's happening over here? Like objectively, it's not just having good writing.
Yeah.
Which is one of
like
the
a lot more factors
in the back of my mind. I know. Yeah, there's more involved. Do you find that there's like a time when imposter syndrome hits you the most, and a time when you like feel it the least?
When other people are talking about something that they're interested in, I start to feel like this weird sense of like jealousy that I don't know how to do that. And it's a weird sort of like, I don't know. It's just because people are like, I'm very fortunate to be surrounded by a lot of very intelligent people. And so just hearing them kind of talk about things they're passionate about, I'm like, oh, that's really cool. It's really cool. But then if anybody, or I feel, maybe this is just general insecurity, but it's like if somebody were to ask me about something that I'm very passionate about, I start thinking like, can I actually hold a conversation about it? Like, can I actually like talk about it intelligently? Like, can I talk about it long enough? Like I know on Twitter or wherever there was a thing that was going around, and it was like, oh, what can you talk about like unprompted for like 30 minutes? And I just like went through and like looked at everybody's answers, and everyone was like, I could talk about this, really legitimate topics. But then even people who were like, oh, I can talk about like Avatar, The Last Airbender, and this and that, like, you know, whatever. But I was just like, oh wow, like even though I like Avatar, like, I don't know if I can talk about it for 30 minutes. And it's just kind of like stuff like that. I think I just start feeling a little bit insecure hearing other people be eloquent.
Yeah,
I don't
because
know
that's
how
part
to
of it,
describe
right?
it. Yeah.
Because part of it is like, okay, I'm gonna start talking about this thing, and then someone's gonna point at me and like correct something, or
Yeah.
like
Or
debate
right,
back
you know what it is
something.
as well? It's like people, I feel like other people can just like remember stuff easier. So they'll be like, oh, well, I remember when I read this, like I read this and it said this, and then this person said that. And I was like, how do you remember anything? Like I read stuff all the time and then I'm like, oh, that was nice. And then later when I quote it to people, I'm like, oh yeah, I read somewhere on the internet. Or like, yeah, there's this book I was reading and this person said this, but I can never remember specifics. So I think it's that level of like, oh, someone's gonna like ask me, well, where did you read that? And I'm like, I don't know. It was an article on the internet.
Yeah,
Like you know what I mean? And it's just kind
yeah,
of, I don't know. I feel like as I'm talking about this more, I'm like, maybe it's just general insecurity for me, and then maybe
part of
for some
it.
people as well. Yeah, that's like at the root of a lot of imposter syndrome. Because even hearing myself say all this, like, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's like I really enjoy something, and I'm afraid that I can't talk about it enough. Like,
Yeah, but that's the thing about like imposter syndrome, right? Like you objectively are aware that no one's gonna like probably come and call you out, and that you probably know a lot of what you're talking about, and that you
yeah,
have likely earned the place that you are, but you're still like shifty-eyed about it. Even
yeah,
though I feel
exactly.
like people that are actual imposters feel like they deserve everything they have.
Yeah, honestly, there was another thing I saw going around somewhere on social media, like wherever I read it, and it was just like, oh, the wrong types of people have imposter syndrome. And I
Yeah,
was like, oh, that's really smart. And that makes perfect sense. So I feel like ever since I read that as well, like I've been trying to think about like the times I do feel insecure about stuff and then just be like, it's probably fine. Like
yeah,
people who should not like should feel insecure, like whatever, but like people who maybe should think twice about the sort of things they say and they do and stuff are not. And that's, I think, one of the larger problems with the world. But
yeah.
that's like, another thing.
Yeah, exactly. They think they're great. They're like, I definitely deserve absolutely everything I have, and I am correct about it all, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it's
Yeah,
like everybody else that's dealing with imposter syndrome that
exactly.
doesn't actually need to. I feel like I find that when I go to like gatherings of people that I don't really know that well, that's when I like have the most imposter syndrome. Like
Hmm.
if I like go to a conference and I don't know people well, or if I like go to some event and I don't know people well, because then I'm like, oh, I have to like say who I am and like what my book is about or whatever, and I like don't
Yeah.
really know this person well, and probably they've like had a certain level of accomplishments that I haven't, and like it can get really like definitely the whole like a good chunk of booknet fest. I was like, how did I get here? What am I doing in this place?
Yeah. Oh gosh.
I
No,
mean,
I agree 100%. That's really nerve wracking. I think to walk into a room and then like just kind of like talk about like what you've done. Like I find I need to get over it obviously, but like every time people are like, oh, tell me about your book or tell me about this, in the back of my mind immediately, I'm just like, okay, describe it properly. Like do not describe it in a way where it sounds like boring or weird. And then and like, because you don't want to be describing it and then someone's looking at you and you can see in their eyes that they're like, I don't understand what you're saying. Like I don't understand like how this is a story. And I'm just like, no. So I'm always trying to tell myself like describe it properly, because you don't like, it's okay if I'm like, I don't know if I belong here, blah blah, but like I don't want to see it in someone else's face. Like I don't want them to be like, oh yeah, I knew like this girl is ridiculous. So
yeah, it's fine
yeah,
if you think you're an imposter, but it's not fine if somebody else thinks you're an imposter.
yeah.
That's
Oh
when you're
gosh.
like, oh no, this is very bad. I really don't like that. Is there a time when you feel like you feel imposter syndrome the least?
Oh, I guess when I'm writing and I'm actually like enjoying what I'm writing,
Mhm.
um, and just kind of I guess the creation process mostly, but just kind of like because I don't plot anything, so I'm just kind of
Yeah,
like making stuff up,
which
and
is
so it's
amazing. I just like I'm amazed by all whole
I love it
pantser.
because
I'm
I
like,
I feel like if I plot a story, then I will know everything that happens, and I will not feel like writing it anymore. So I think I'm just like afraid of losing motivation and like passion and that kind of
yeah,
thing. I'm like, oh, I know maybe what I want the climax to be and like how I want it to end, and then it's like, okay, let's see if this will work. I don't know.
yeah,
But usually when I'm writing and if I really enjoy it, then I I'm focusing more on like what I'm doing, and then I'm not really paying that much attention to like what other people are going to think or like what they're going to say or like whatever. Like I'm just like, this is a pretty sick story. I'm really happy. That sort of thing. So
exactly. I would definitely say the same. Like and we were at Kes Costalis's launch for her poetry book, which I'll also link. That video would have come out. I'll just like uplink the video. Anyway, we were talking at the launch and I was like, yeah, like when I write a first draft, I think it was the best shit to ever go out there. Yeah. I'm like writing it, nobody has seen it. I've like polished it and I'm like, this is fantastic. I'm great at this. This is the best. This is gonna blow people out of the water. I'm gonna get a 6-figure deal for this shit. It's gonna be fantastic. And that's when it's like greatest. And also like if I've just had like a big win, like when I signed with my agent, then I was like, imposter syndrome what? Because I was just so happy and like felt so, excited about that. And the same with when I got my book deal, and even like when I first had gotten invited to BookNet Fest, like as soon as I like get a win, I'm in like a really great mode. And then like time lapses, and that's when it's like I've had more time to like negative thought loop on it, and then I'm like,
right? Or it's like sometimes you forget. I feel like because being invited to a book festival is a very big deal, but it's like, I guess maybe in the time afterwards, you're just like, wow, what am I doing? Like whatever, because so much time has passed. But I that is completely relatable. So
what are your strategies for getting over imposter syndrome?
I think my one strategy for getting over imposter syndrome, the only thing I think that's worked for me is to really take a step back and maybe not focus so much on anything outside of what I'm doing. Because I find that the second I start to focus on even my environment, like literally anything else except for the story and like what it is that I want to accomplish, that's when I kind of start getting into my head a little bit more and like, I don't know about this, like this opening sounds weird. Oh, how come I can't like write it properly? Like that sort of thing. But if I really focus on like the reason I maybe want to tell a specific story or just kind of like how I'm going to feel when it's finished. Because most of the time, because I don't plan anything, like it's like I'm just really excited to read it at the end. So I'm always just like, if I just think about like how I want to write the story, the kinds of characters I want to write, like what it will mean to me when it's finished, and how much I'm probably going to enjoy reading it, then that's kind of the one thing that like recenters me and just like makes me, I don't know, remember why it is that I enjoy writing. So
yeah, it's like an idle mind thing. Like when you're busy, everything is fine. And the second your mind has time to float away idle, that's when there's like some sort of like quote about that.
There is. I feel like there is.
Idle mind, something.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know what it is.
That's what it is.
If I find it, I'll put it down here and you guys can see the quote that I couldn't remember for the life of me.
Yeah.
But yeah, that feeling of once you like kind of start thinking about all that peripheral stuff, like that's when imposter syndrome leaks in. It's part of all that extra stuff that you don't necessarily need to think about, but you are thinking about because that's the way it goes.
Yeah. And it's hard, I think. Like, I think being a part of the writing community, it's really good to find your people and like find people who you can bounce ideas off of and like who are there to support you and then you support them. And it's like wonderful and very synergistic and everything. But then at a point, I feel it becomes a little bit difficult to hear what other people are doing and this and that. Because I feel like if you're not grounded enough in what you're working on, then it's very easy to kind of like hear other people's ideas and then feel like, oh, that's a really good idea. We write in the same genre. Like, I wish I could come up with something like that. Or like, oh, this person's writing that. Oh, I wish I could like write a trilogy, or I wish I could write a duology. I wish I knew what like standalone with like serious potential about, like that sort of thing. And then all of a sudden you're just once again like outside of yourself. And then that's kind of where a lot of the, for me anyway, like where a lot of the insecurity comes from. But yeah.
Because it's easy to feel like you're not doing enough and like therefore, or that like other people are doing a bunch of stuff and you're like doing something half baked and therefore you are the imposter and like they're the real artist or writer because they're doing all this stuff and you're just like sitting over here like I don't really know, and that's what makes you feel like I don't have my shit together.
Yeah, Right? Like, it's great to have community. Like, I'm not saying that it's like not good to have
Yeah.
community, but I think it's also important. Like, you can't compare yourself to everyone, especially like your friends. That's not a very
Yeah.
productive thing to do, because you're supposed to like support each other and be there for each other and whatnot. And if you're in your mind, like, you're always competing with them, then like, how is that productive for anyone? Right? Like, that's
Yeah.
so.
I feel like I just end up trying to distract myself from it. Or sometimes I'll even just like try and like come up with new ideas just so I can feel like I actually have the talent to like come up with something new, because that helps me feel like I'm not an imposter. I feel like the times when I most feel like I'm an imposter is like I'm revising the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. And so there's so much
Yeah.
time to like feel doubt every time I have to fix it and
Uh-huh.
be like, is this actually any good? Am I actually doing this correctly? Am I actually deserving of this position versus something like shiny and new that nobody else has seen? So I guess I like try and like go back to the times when I feel the least amount of imposter syndrome. And that's
Mhm.
kind of what I'm working towards. But also I feel like now that I have done like a small amount of cognitive behavioral therapy, I feel like I will also start to think of like, okay, you going through the steps of like, let me objectively think about this and like write down like, I'm worried that someone will unmask me in a crowd and they'll all realize I'm an
In
imposter.
the crowd. I
Yeah.
love it.
And that I'll embarrass myself in public and I'll be shunned from the whole community. And then you like write down, like, part of the process is you write down like the percentage of like how much you believe that. And then you think of like something that is like a more realistic reason for why you have that thought or what's
Yeah.
happening, and then work through it that way. And so now I'm trying to do a bit more of that in my head. I'm supposed to write it down. I'm not good at writing things down. But I try and just kind of do it in my head a little bit more objectively. And that kind of helps as well. Because it's like, I feel like I agree with what you said. It's like a big part of it is just general insecurity that then like manifests in this very specific feeling that you are not belonging, that you're not where
Yeah.
you're supposed to be, and that you are undeserving of this thing you have earned, even though objectively you've worked really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of what I find helps. And maybe that will be helpful for you. Louisa, tell us more about your book.
I will. Oh my God. And like, once again, the first thing in my mind was like, describe it properly. Like, do not
Yes.
do this.
What's that
Oh,
about?
what's the book about? So my young adult contemporary debut, coming out in 2021, currently titled Comes and Goes. It is a story about a 16-year-old girl named Chinelo, and she lives in sort of like I don't want to say the word like rough, but sort of like I guess like a rougher neighborhood. It's primarily an immigrant neighborhood. She grew up there with her close friends. Most of them moved away, but she absolutely loves it there. Like, for the world, like, she would not leave.
Mhm.
And so one day, this kind of neighborhood convenience store gets broken into. And when that happens, that really sort of shakes her foundation. And then all of a sudden, like, she's starting to see the cracks in her neighborhood. Like, slowly, the place is being gentrified, things are changing, people are being forced out, new things are coming in at the same time as her relationships are changing. And she's really just kind of feeling unstable. And her whole thing is like, just, I guess, the constant monster of change, and like, if she's willing to accept the things that are happening in her world, or if she's going to kind of fail to adapt. So
Yeah.
very excited.
Wow, it's so exciting. And that's so like, well, at least like I feel like in other places, like in Toronto, it's like very like timely. Like that's
Yeah.
happening in so many neighborhoods, even like where I live, which was, I don't know if it was considered rough. We did have 2.5 porn shops, but that just kind of made it a little bit seedy.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they built condos and now there's like a ton more stuff and like things are a little bit different, but there's still like the same population of people. Like it is, I feel
Yeah.
like something that's like very timely, and especially like for youth going through those changes and like
Mhm.
having things change yourself and like friends moving away. Like when you're a teenager and a kid, like friends moving away is so stressful and like
Yeah.
sad and hard. And yeah.
Mhm. And I think I think with that, like, I just really wanted to talk about, because I know a lot of people will talk about like how neighborhoods change and how people are getting forced out and this and that. And I feel like a lot of times when we read about that sort of thing, it's very it's very sort of like, these are the statistics of this happening in your city. Did you know that this and that? And it's like numbers being thrown around and that sort of thing. But I thought it's important, I think, to talk about more human stories, and then talk about specifically how people in those neighborhoods are dealing with that sort of thing. Because it's one thing to be like, oh, parts of Toronto are being gentrified and people are being forced out. But then it's like, well, where are those people going? And like, what are these new people moving in? Like, where are they coming from? I don't know, just like a whole bunch of questions that people have, but mostly like the people who exist in the neighborhood, like, where do they have to go now if they're being priced out of a place that they built and a place that they live? So
Exactly.
yeah, I think it's important to humanize a lot of the statistics that are running around.
And that's an important word too. And like humanizing the people too, because I feel like people have an idea of gentrification as like, oh, they're just taking out the people that are doing crime and it's certain people that are like nice families. And it's like, well, no, that's actually not correct.
Yeah.
Like, you know, your feeling about a neighborhood is not an accurate reflection of what the neighborhood actually is or the people that live there. And it's important to see them as individual people with lives that they are, and not kind of movable pieces that can be kind of shoved aside for things that you think are prettier.
Yeah, exactly.
Exciting. So I'm going to link all of Louisa's social information and all of that below. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you, Louisa, for chatting with me. If you have any comments, like you want to join the conversation, like talk about any times you felt imposter syndrome or kind of what it means to you, please comment below. Also, if there's a conversation topic you want to see on this new series in conversation, also add that in the comments and I can like go over that for other guests. And so this series is basically going to be like a monthly thing at the very least, and I'll have different writers and authors on all the time, and so look forward to seeing more of that. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed to me already, please subscribe below. I post all sorts of things about writing and publishing and my experience of being a writer and author, and thank you again for watching. Bye!